hopefully we will be on. Let's go to YouTube and see. Okay, we're live.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to say hello to everybody and sorry for the slight delay. I am still adjusting to Riverside. It's taking a little bit longer than I care for. However, the quality is worth pursuing because I did post the last one, which I also had a little difficulty on, and it says Franco has Riverside open in other tabs, which means you've got it open up twice. You need to close it on one of them.
Oh, I do? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay now?
Let's see if it goes away. It seems as if it has.
Okay. Good.
Well, that's pretty good, isn't it? It's
We're
saying,
both learning.
yes, it's saying, I'm watching Franco, and Franco is making a small mistake. Okay. All right.
That's
Okay. And
good.
I also think that, oh, yeah, she's with Franco. Okay. So we're going to say, hi, Maggie. Apparently, we can't. Oh, wait a minute. I do see a number. All right. I think you're on. If you want to write something in the chat, Maggie, that would verify that we actually see you. Um, but anyhow, everyone, this will be obviously recorded, and most of it, it looks like it's going to have to be watched recorded. I'd like to say a couple things before we get started. And the first one is that I just literally landed like an hour and a half ago from returning from Atlanta. I attended a private money. It won't let me, she says. Okay, that's interesting. Huh. I guess we're not going to get the chat today.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. I am having fun because if I don't laugh, you know what I'll do? I'll cry and I don't want to cry. That's funny. Anyhow, I was just starting to say I'd gone to a private master, a PML, a private money lenders mastermind with Abraham, Gray, and Alexis, and a whole bunch of other speakers and people, and it was freaking awesome. So I am very thankful to them. I want to say thank you to them for that. And I also want to say a big thank you to Franco. Franco Montano, my guest here today, was a guest about a year ago. And I felt lucky then. But now, with the exception of a little, oh, wait, is that you telling me to be quiet? Uh, oh, hold on. So sorry, guys. Okay, I don't know what that is and why that went off, but I'm gonna try to ignore it. I think I was much better a year ago than I am now, but that's all right. Franco was with us a year ago, and he's with us
yeah.
again today. And we're really, really lucky here. Oh, we have a couple of more people on now. That's good. And the reason that we're lucky is not that many people have solid experience in co-living or co-housing because it is such a new arena. And I myself have been, pursuing it for about a year, a little bit more maybe. Franco, how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2020. So I started exploring co-housing and pad split in 2019, but I was a little bit slow to jump on it. Like I wanted to make sure it was still really new at that time too. So I spent about 6 months really studying it before I got my first set of houses open. So I got them open in 2020. So right before COVID, like before the whole country shut down.
Oh,
Yeah.
right
Of
before
course,
COVID.
my timing is perfect.
Of course, of course. That's interesting. And it also does raise one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and that is about people who are looking at it now
Yeah.
and, maybe having paralysis, because it is a different thing. And
Yeah.
doubts can set in, and yet you're telling me that you spent 6 months before you
Yeah.
actually jumped in. What were you
Yeah.
doing during those 6 months?
So during that 6 months, well, once I made the determination that I wanted to do co-housing, it's more kind of getting comfortable with the model, uh, getting comfortable with the market. So at the time, Pad Split was only in Atlanta. That was the only market that they had at the time. So I had to get really comfortable with the Atlanta market, like making sure that I was okay investing there. I like the prospects of it long term, because I already knew like co-housing was going to be a long-term strategy for me, long-term plan for me. So I wanted to make sure that it all fit, kind of everything aligned, and get comfortable with the risk itself, right? So there is a lot of risk when you're doing a co-house, just like any other type of business, but there's a lot of risk in investing in um, real estate. So I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with all the risks and the scenarios and things that could play out. And so I did that. That was kind of what I did during that 6 month period, and really kind of finding the right deal too, because it did take time to kind of find the right deal.
So, a couple of questions come up, and yet I want other people to know what was going on before you jumped into co living. But let me just start by saying, with why just pad split? What, did you find anybody else that was doing co living?
No, actually, no, I didn't. It was like there's no one doing co-living at the time. Which so what happened was, like my journey was, my background's been more in business. I've had a lot of different businesses, and so
Yeah,
when I
tell us
made the
about that, and
determination,
tell
okay,
us some
so
of the businesses and the time frame, because you
yeah,
look like you're
so
20, you know.
yeah,
So
thank
you
you, I
better
appreciate it,
let
thank
people
you.
know you're not. You're 23.
Yeah, I wish, yeah, I wish I was that young. But so I started my business journey around 18 years old. So like my first real business, like what I consider real business, when I um started getting into franchising. So I got my first franchise when I was 21. I was
Wow,
a 7-Eleven franchisee, as one of the youngest ones at the time.
that is very
um
young to put a franchise in someone's hands.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, I mean,
because it's
well, my
their
thought
name.
process. Oh, thank you. And what my thought process was is like, franchises, like a lot of franchises have a high success rate, and so my thought process, 95 percent of franchises, survive more than 5 years. So I felt like, okay, if I'm going to do business, it was going to be kind of my foundation of what I wanted to build on top of like everything else I wanted to do. I wanted the highest degree of success as possible. So my thought process at the time was like, okay, well, I'll go with a known brand franchise where I know I could kind of get a return. And that's kind of how I found myself kind of getting into franchise. I've owned three different franchises since, three different brands.
Wow,
7-Eleven, my first one. I've done Jimmy John's sandwiches for a few years with my partners, and my last one was T-Mobile. I've ran a
wow.
T-Mobile business. I
So
did that
food
for
for the
about 11
first
years.
two, and then phones.
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of businesses in between that too as well. I've had business in about 14 different industries now.
Wow,
So everything from agriculture to cell phone retail, like I've done a lot. I've actually owned a wireless, like outsourcing business as well. So I owned a call center company before call centers were popular. So I had a call center almost close to 18 years ago.
wow.
um, and so
That's
I've had
very
three.
labor intensive. Were
it's
you
it's a tough business. It
were
wasn't
you in the
easy.
business, like in it? Like, did you were you at the call center?
Yeah, I overseed. Yeah, I actually lived in the Philippines for half my life. I was born here in the United States, but I lived there when I was doing business. And when I launched the call center over there, that was when outsourcing was starting to become really popular. I felt it was a really big trend. I wanted to kind of jump on top of it. At the time, it wasn't called outsourcing, wasn't like how it is now, where we have a lot of self-employed people using agents, like virtual assistants. Back then, it wasn't that popular. It was big companies that were doing outsourcing. So my clients were large companies that we would outsource like 50 employees or something at a time, like big chunks of employees.
Wow.
And those were mainly my we did telemarketing sales. So people that called you in the middle of dinner that interrupted your day, that was me, my guy, my team. And so
I
so
love it.
that's what we did. I did that for several years until we sold the company. And then I did a bunch of other businesses as well. I just
And did you come back to the States at that point?
yeah, after I sold I sold that and a few other businesses too. I had an encoding company, which is basically like call center, except
Mhm.
we did non verbal work. So we did like data entry stuff like that. We did that for like
Interesting.
insurance companies,
Yep.
in those type of businesses, and I sold that company too, as well as the agriculture. I had a farm. We were raising chickens. We had like 7,000 chickens that we were growing for companies. I did that for a few years as well. So
Seriously.
yeah, I did. I did.
In the States or in the
And that was
Philippines?
in the Philippines. Yeah, I did that
Oh
in the
my
Philippines.
God.
Yeah, yeah. So we
That's
did that for a
amazing.
contract basis for like a big company, and we grow chickens for them. And so did that for a few years.
That's amazing. It just goes or it speaks to just how creative the entrepreneurial mind is.
Yeah, I mean, when I
Because
was
it was
much
not a
younger,
straight line. It
no, it
was
wasn't. I mean, see, when I was younger, like, so I made the determination when I was 16, so quite a long time ago now. But I made a determination where like I wanted to just be successful at any cost. Like most of us, like, when you get that page where like you're done, you're tired, and you just want to do whatever it takes to be successful. And when I made that determination, I didn't care what the business was. Like a lot of us, we don't care what the business
right,
is. We just want to be successful no matter what,
right.
right? And
Yeah.
that's where I was. Like I found myself like, okay, I'll find it. Like I'll come across opportunities, ideas, and and I didn't care what it was. I'm willing to grind and put in all the hard work and do whatever it took to be successful. And I figured like, and as I did different industries, because when I did each industry, I didn't know anything about them. Like I knew nothing about raising chickens. I knew nothing about the call center or any, like I didn't know anything about these businesses. But you know, when you're willing to put in the work and effort, you will figure it out.
Yep.
So just like when we did co-housing, I figured I'll figure it out. I figured out the way how to make it work,
And the
right? And the
same
more
and
experience you build, the easier it becomes to do that.
so you did the same thing with, oh, somebody's asking how many chickens. Okay, I guess we are
Well, around
allowed to
seven
chat on it.
thousand. We had 7,000 chickens. So each building
7,000?
housed about 1,000. So I had about 7 buildings,
Oh my
good sized
God.
buildings. Yeah. So because we
Oh my
needed
God.
room, like if the building was too small, they won't grow. They will actually stay small. So you actually need
Yeah.
a lot of space.
A lot of things in nature are that way.
Yeah.
Plants, if you put them too close together, won't grow. Things like that. Got it. And people don't do well if
Yeah.
they're all in prison. They're really like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And so what happened was, after I had these different businesses, when I sold my T-Mobile business, which was my last business, I had 42 locations in Southern California. I had 750 employees.
You had
So that was my
750
largest
employees
business.
in the AT&T
Yeah,
business
yeah, in the T-Mobile business. Yeah, in the
and the
T-Mobile business.
T-Mobile business.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that was my largest business that I managed. It was a lot of employees. It was a lot of work. Um, and so when I sold that business, my idea was to actually find another business to buy. And so I went on that search for almost a year and a half. And I actually found my way into co-housing by accident because, I came close to buying a couple businesses. I almost bought a tour bus company in Las Vegas. Thankfully, that didn't. That would have been a disaster. So good thing
Yeah,
that
in
didn't work out.
COVID, I think
Yeah,
they
that would
would,
have not been really, I would have
yeah,
been very sad
pardon the pun, but
about
the
a year or
brakes would
so
have had to
after.
go on it.
Yeah, and so what ended up happening was I made a few property that had an Airbnb that I had in California that appreciated really well. Like I had a few properties that I did really well, and I ended up selling them around 2018. I figured it's the right moment because I felt like appreciation wise would slow down because the prices got really high. And so I sold them and I got a crazy return. I'll share one story because I think it has a big impact where one deal could change your life. Like it
Yep.
could make a really big impact. So I bought a primary residence, my old primary residence in 2011. And that primary residence, this was I around that time in 2011, for those of you that were investing or kind of remember some of that times, those were the times when you could get a deal really cheap. Like that's when you had condos, or like, I'm sorry, not condos, duplexes and triplexes you could buy for like $100,000. Like they were practically giving them away
Yep.
around that 2010 2011 period. And so I tried to buy a duplex for $100,000 here in Los Angeles, but I never won. Like I always lost because I didn't know about hard money lenders or anything back then, and so um, I kept on getting beat out by investors. Until one day, I was talking to a realtor who told me, and I really wanted to buy a house. Like I wanted to get a property because I knew, like if I didn't get it, then prices were gonna go up, and I was gonna miss the boat. So they told me like Franco, go with a higher priced house because those are gonna sit because everyone's buying the cheap houses right now. Go with a higher priced house and give a lower offer and go with that angle. So that's what I did. So I
Smart.
bought a house that was they wanted 350,000, which you would imagine is a lot of money at the time because I could buy a duplex for 100, right? So like 350 is a lot, but it was zoned multifamily. So it was on a 10,000 square foot lot. It was zoned multifamily, and it was in a city, in a part of a city that was near an area that was gentrifying. There's a lot of right.
Oh,
The city next to it was an area that was high priced homes, houses that were like $2-3 million.
wow.
But those houses were on a hill, so I knew that they're gonna run out of space to build houses, and those people are gonna move over down to that area where I wanted to buy my house. So I ended up buying that house and I put 3% down. Okay, I bought it for 320,000. Total closing cost was like maybe
Wow.
$11,000, somewhere around there, eleven
Yep.
thousand, thirteen
Yep.
thousand dollars, right? Okay. I lived in that small house myself. I lived there for until 2018. Okay, I lived there. So I bought 2011. I lived there 7 years, right? With the intention, knowing that one day when the values go up, I'm going to sell this house, and then I'm going to move to a nicer house. Hopefully, is the game plan, and then redevelop it, right? Because it's zone multifamily.
Yep.
And so what I ended up doing was, and I didn't know anything about real estate because remember, my main business during this time was still cell phone. That's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Food,
yeah, so that's
chickens,
all I knew, right?
cell
I just knew
phones.
one day it's like, okay, but I always wanted to make some sort of money no matter what I did. So even though I was
Yep.
buying a house, I wanted to gain value. I just didn't want to buy a nice house. I wanted a house where I could make money on it. I wanted to make money on everything I do,
Good for
right?
you.
And so I knew one day I could redevelop it. So what I decided was, because I wasn't a developer, and this was going to be when I hired an architect to kind of do preliminary study on it, and I found out I could build 6 townhouses on this property. Right, I demolished the
Holy
old house and could build
camole.
6 townhouses on it. I ended up selling it to a developer from New York that had turned 1031 exchange money he needed to deploy. He sold, so I'm sorry, he sold the property. He bought mine with 1031 exchange. I sold it to him for 1.2 million. So my
Nice.
11 or 13 thousand dollars that I bought with this house in 7 years made me a tremendous amount of money. Right, more money
Dang.
than I ever thought I was gonna make on that one deal. And it's one deal, and
That's
that
awesome.
coupled with the amount of money, because I made a huge return on my Airbnb too, well over 400 or 500% return on my money. Um,
Oh, so you
and
were like,
so
wait
those
a
two
minute.
things
This
were
real
the
estate looks.
compelling thing that told me, wait, Franco, why buy another business when I could just get a property and not do anything with it for like whatever, how many amount of years, or just rent it as a long-term rent or whatever, and you make more money than you would have done like with all the hard work and risk you do with doing a business. That's what got me to real estate.
Yeah.
That moment, that those two sales are what got me into real estate. And from that moment on, I knew I wanted to do real estate and I didn't want to do anything else.
Yeah. The
At least
numbers.
until now. I do more stuff now, but at the time, I knew that's what I wanted to do and focus on.
Well, it sounds like the numbers were screaming
Yeah, it's
for
a no-brainer. I
themselves.
mean, like, it's just like a no-brainer. Like I
Yeah.
looked at like when I sold my companies, how much work, hard risk, and effort it all took, and then I look at what I just did with these 2 houses that I just bought and literally sat on. Like one was an Airbnb that I rented like during seasonally, and the other one was just a house I lived in. Like, are you serious? Like, I mean, real estate's amazing, and so
It is amazing. It is
yeah,
amazing.
and
So,
so I
so
mean,
at
where else can you get those type of like? It's very hard to do that with many other things, and so that's what got me into it. So I went the journey that all of us real estate investors do. Like, okay, now we determine we want to do real estate, but what are you going to do in real estate? There's just so much, right? The ocean is so big, and so that's when I went through the journey to decide what is it that we wanted to do. Did we want to do multifamily, RV, mobile home parks, self storage? Like, what are we
yeah,
doing? Am I going to be a lender? Am I going like what am I going to do?
I know.
Am I
I
only buying
know. I
foreclosures? Am
know.
I doing fixer
It's
uppers? Right?
hard to
Am I
put
a
the
flipper?
blinders on.
Exactly. And so I knew I needed to narrow down because I know I needed to niche. I can't be, oh, I would do everything under the sun, right? I
Yep.
think that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make. And
Yep.
so I went into Dre try to figure out, and I thought it led me to multifamily. I almost bought a multifamily 32 unit apartment building in Tampa. I almost did.
Wow,
I
that would be
almost
a
got
good
it under
size,
contract.
32 units.
Yeah, and because I wanted something to replace what some of the money I was making when I had my stores, and so I knew I needed income, and the only way to do it was like a bigger deal, right? So it's like, so I needed an apartment building for me to kind of replace some of the money that I was making to kind of cover my expenses, and I was not excited about the amount of money that I had to shell out, right? Because you buy an
Mm.
apartment building, you're shelling out a lot of money, plus you got to do the value add. So, you're easily shelling out. Like at that time, the apartment building, I was gonna be able to get it like I think 1.2 or 1.5 million, which would have been a great deal, um, in Tampa. But um, I felt like the return wise, like, is a lot of money to deploy for the route of return I'm getting.
And for
Until
one
one day,
property, because if
for one
something
property, right, you're
happens,
taking a tremendous amount of risk,
yeah, it's like you're buying a
and
big egg,
yeah,
and
bring
then you're
egg,
like,
and
what
so
happens
I
if it
just
cracks?
yeah, exactly. And so I wasn't fully comfortable. I was really kind of like hesitant. But one day I was talking to a realtor from Atlanta, and he said, "Have you looked into pad split?" And I said, "What's a pad split? Like what? A pad what? Like what
Yeah.
are you even talking about? Like doesn't make any sense to me." And so I did research. That's what opened the door. I'm like, okay, well, because I wasn't fully sold yet. I wanted to do multifamily yet, and so I dug in, and when I understood the model more, and I saw and I did the numbers and I ran what the projection was, it was just a no-brainer for me. Like I was much more comfortable with the risk. The returns were much higher, and at the time, houses in Atlanta were like $100,000. So if I'm renting out the rooms and I'm getting 50,000 a year in rent, and the house is only 100,000, it's like a no-brainer.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. You don't have to think on it.
yeah,
Where did you learn how to properly underwrite? Because, like, for those of you who don't know, I am working with Franco to help me get past number 2 and 3 and 4. I did the first one on my own, and it's now ready to be filled. Um, and I want to get going. So I'm working with him.
yeah,
And I've seen a lot of calculators, and some of them are very complicated. And I like yours because it's not overly complicated.
yeah. I
But
try to keep it simple.
yeah, it's good though. It's good because you can see the simplicity and you can see the logic. But how did you decide what needed to go where?
Good question. So when I first started, um, part of my background, I don't know if you know this, I've done a lot of things. So I used to be a financial advisor also. So as a financial advisor, I was licensed for several years, and and I started out as a trader. I traded for many years, my whole life. That's one of the things I've loved, until recently, until I got into real estate, because it takes a lot of time. But one of the first things I learned in investments is managing your risk. So the
Okay.
first thing I did, even before looking at the deal, is if this doesn't work. So if I did a co-housing property, what is my worst case scenario,
Hmm.
right? And at that time, my worst case scenario. So like that's what happens if because I didn't know if it was gonna like. No one knew anything about about what a co-housing property was. Like I couldn't talk or ask anybody it because no one really did. I mean, some people did it like student housing, like small scale or
Yep.
whatever, but not the way that we think that we want to target like middle income, low to mid income
Yep.
people, right? Like
Yep.
average working people. And so I didn't know if it was going to work or not, or how am I going to find the tenants, or what. So I figured like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? I do this, I do the remodel, and no one rents it. Okay, if that happens, what is my worst case? How much am I losing? And my PITI at the time on that price house was like $700. So I figured, okay, if it
That's
doesn't
nice.
work, I could carry the $700 or whatever per house for a few months until I could reposition it and sell it. So that risk, looking at from the risk standpoint, made me more comfortable because I already knew what the worst case scenario is. What is there for me to be scared of if I already know what the worst case scenario is? If
Right.
I'm okay with the worst case scenario, then I'm okay with it.
Good.
Nothing else really matters. Like just do it,
Yep.
right? And I figured it out the rest along the way. And that's how I approach every business I've ever done and ever did. Is I know what I would lose worst case scenario if things didn't work out at all. Because not everything works, right? Like you
Yep.
have businesses that work and you have businesses that don't. It's just the way it works.
Right.
Sometimes things change. You had a business that made money and then sometimes it stops making you money. It happens. It's like, businesses, they're very fluid. And so that's how
Absolutely.
I approached it. And so
Absolutely.
I was comfortable with the risk, so I went and did it.
Where did you start? Like, what size of property did you start with, and what kind of
So, I,
amenities and features do you think we should be looking for? Talk a
so
little bit about what makes a good co-living property.
yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of different factors and steps, but I'll do like a summarized version of it. Because it really depends. Like I have properties that are small as 4 bedroom, as big as 10 bedroom. They all work. It matters about the deal and what you're doing and how you do it along the way. I started out going with your typical 7, 8 bedroom. My first ones were 8 bedroom. The first two that I got up and
Eight
running,
bedrooms?
yeah, 8 bedrooms, because that was like numbers wise, that's what everyone was doing. So I figured like, okay, that why reinvent the wheel, right? Like, that's what kind of there what's going on the platform at that moment during that time. I just went along with what everyone else is doing. Everyone else was doing basic amenities and, I mean, basic furniture and furnishings. I was just doing that too. So I just kind of wanted to learn the model and kind of see. So I didn't want to do anything outside of what everyone else was doing, because I just wanted to test it out first. Does it work? Right. I
Prove the
figured that, okay, once
concept.
I get in, because then like I know based on business, like a lot of times you go in, you learn the business, and then you make adjustments. You don't make adjustments while you're going in the business because you don't know what the adjustment you're doing is going to work
Right,
or not.
right.
So you want to kind of just start as like a baseline, get settled, and then make adjustments as you go, based on kind of what's happening and what you think is the right business decision. And that's
And
kind
what
of what I
about
did.
where to buy? How did you figure that out?
So you guys are not gonna like this answer, but I didn't know. I just randomly I just bought houses like okay, this is where people had their houses. I'll buy houses there too. Like I literally didn't reinvent any of the wheel. Like I just kind of roughly saw like okay, they're doing 8 bedroom there. I'll test it out. Now I've come a long way since then, right? Because the beginning I knew how important your first one is. Your first one lays the foundation to the rest of everything else you're gonna do. You have a bad experience on your first one, you're not gonna do the second one. You're gonna be scared. You're gonna be stuck in
Yeah.
analysis paralysis because you had a very bad experience. I knew my first one had to be good. It had to give me a good return. So then I could go and get it more aggressive. And what happened was the more houses I put up, the more aggressive I got. And so I do a lot of experimentation in my house. So like how do I know where to go and what to do? I didn't. I did an experimentation and I put my money at risk to learn. And that's what I did. So now I know a lot about the model, but I use my houses to experiment with it. Like, oh, does it need to be near bus stop? Okay, let me test it. I'll put a house there and let me see if it works or not. Like, oh, how big does it be? Does it work if it's a small house? Let me buy a house and test it. Like, I got to a point where I just started doing things to test the model and see kind of what works, what doesn't work. Like, what should I do? How should I do my rehab? What furnishing should I have? Like, I did a lot of experimentation in my house, and like the more like houses I got, the more cash flow I have, the more experimentation I could do. I looked at it as more as like an R&D expense, right?
Yeah,
Like I use it, like if it doesn't work, then I stop doing it or fix it or adjust it or whatever.
right, right.
And that's what
Well,
I
that
did.
that is smart.
Yeah.
However, I think you do need a certain amount of capital to do that. I mean,
It, it
like
was a
you said,
long road. Like,
if the first one is bad, you're probably going to end up quitting.
exactly.
If you have borrowed and the first one's bad and you still keep going, and the second one's bad, you're in a shitload of debt.
Exactly. Well, and but that's why now, like, I help some investors, right? That's why I help investors kind of get started in the right foot, because so they don't make those mistakes. Because I've seen a lot of people make a lot of mistakes, lose a lot of money, because there's a lot of things to consider when you're doing a co-living property, right? Like everything that you do has an effect on your return, right? So like the location you choose, where the house, the layout of the house, like where it's located, like how you finance it, how you rehab it, how you furnish, every single one of those factors has an impact on your return, right?
And
So
how long it
if
takes to
you
fill it, how long
how
it
long
takes
it
to
takes,
finish it.
there's so many variables. I know like some people don't like to say it. I'm pretty real. Like I don't like to play games. Like I tell you what it is because I don't like, I know a lot of investors save a lot of money before they go out and put the money at risk. I like people knowing what they're getting themselves into before they get themselves into it. And so I let them know like it is, and so each of those things have an impact on your return. And so, but there are ways to fine tune every single step. So then that way you kind of have a more predictable, less surprises. You have a more kind of, you understand what type of return you roughly could get and keep yourself a little bit out of trouble. Like, I could help that now, but at the time I didn't, so I had to do it myself. I had to experiment and do all these different things to figure it out. But
How
that's how
long
I did it.
how long did it take you? Like how much experimentation did it take before you felt like I know what I'm doing?
Well, I'm still experimenting until now, so it's like it's hard for me to say. I still do a lot of it now because I always come up with new ideas and try new things. But after my third house, I already started wanting to test the model, right? So my first two, three houses, I um, I stuck to the quit like the normal process, like okay, 8 bedroom in these areas near a bus stop or whatever. And then I started exploring. I wondered, does it work in a nice neighborhood? Is it only in D class neighborhoods? Does it work in a C class, B class neighborhood? Will it work in an A class neighborhood? Will it work in areas near a school or not near a school? Will it work in areas near a shopping? Like, I just started experimenting and doing more of these houses in different areas, trying different things, different layouts, different different things. And that so that at that point I started getting more comfortable because I knew, like, I guess in a way you get a little cocky because you get more confident, like, oh, like, I because all my houses were filling and they were going fine. So like, I'm like, okay, you know what, my like, if it doesn't work, my income from these houses could cover that.
Yep.
And then it
Yep.
worked. And then, okay, my income from all these houses could cover that. I'll do it again. It worked. Like,
Yep.
and then so I was able to see the extent of what I could do. And
Nice.
until today I still do it. I still do a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, I well, you're being encouraged to, and you're doing that by nature also, because you didn't
Yeah,
just go
well,
and become. Yeah,
so I
for
like to
sure.
challenge myself. You know what I mean? Like, it's so after a while you get, I don't like to say you get bored, but you want to see what you could do, right? Like,
I
if you do
understand.
well and you're good at something, you kind of want to see how far you could take it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you want to see how far you could take it. It's more of it. It's also a little, not only are you making money, but it's a little bit of a challenge, right? Like, it's almost like you want to become better and better and better. And so that's, I mean, I guess that's part of it, right? You want to become better at
Yep.
what you do
Yep.
and know more about what you could do with
Yep.
it.
And we have that in common because I don't need to work, but I do like challenging myself.
Yeah, I mean, you
And
got to. You got
I
life is
heard this
short, right? Life is
exactly.
short.
Life is short, and what do you want to do with it? I mean,
Yeah.
I heard the same question being asked of Abraham
Oh,
over the weekend. Someone
yeah.
said to him, "Well, if you've got all this, why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I don't want to be bored because
Yeah.
it's challenging. I like trying to see what I can do."
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, so the funny thing is, so when I sold the company, like, you think, like, okay, you could ride off in the sunset and you just retire. But if your whole life, like, if you're young and if your whole life all you've done is just kind of doing business, doing work, and you enjoy it, like, you truly enjoy it, like, it's not like it's something you really truly enjoy, it's very hard to stop. It's almost like if your hobby is like crocheting, all of a sudden, like, okay, you made a really nice crochet, you're gonna stop,
yeah,
right? Like, oh, you made the most amazing crochet that's ever made. I'm gonna stop now and just enjoy it for the rest of my life. Of course
no,
not.
no,
I mean, of course, I like.
no,
I mean, you want the next challenge, right? And I
exactly.
always, like, I'm fortunate enough now. I'm at a point where I tell myself, like, I'll do something as long as I like doing it. So if it
Good,
gets to a point where I don't want to do it anymore, then I just stop.
and
I
that's a
will not do
great,
it anymore. You know
and
what I mean?
that's
You
a
just move on.
freaking awesome
Yeah.
luxury that you've earned
Yeah. Exactly. Right. I mean,
because
it takes
people who
stages to get there.
exactly, but people who are okay with having a W-2 and going to the same job all
Yeah.
the time and waiting for the next raise and the next promotion and thinking that that is it. Well, when they eventually end up hating their job,
Yeah.
they kind of earned that too.
Yeah. No. Exactly. I mean, and it's like, you know, it's it's nothing against those that, like, have a good job with W-2 or enjoy it, right? That's nothing wrong with
Well,
that,
the thing
right?
is,
It's
when you're enjoying it, it's fine.
Yeah,
But if
exactly,
you're
right?
never
It's just
doing
more
anything
about, like,
else, if you're not
yeah,
taking any chances, if you're not pushing yourself,
yeah, you'll never know what
then
you could do.
exactly. And
Yeah.
if you end up not liking it, because maybe the job is great, but you got a real jerk of a boss
Yeah.
that comes in, a new one, well, then you're kind of stuck. Do you mind backtracking a little bit? I'd like
Sure,
to
sure.
hear your opinion on what you learned about the higher class properties,
Okay.
B plus, A minus. What about those neighborhoods? Because that's where I'm personally more interested in.
Okay. Yeah.
And I know that Pad Split started, at least initially, with C minus, C
Yeah.
minus, D.
Yeah.
What
So
did
because
you find
the
about the
thought
higher
process,
end?
yeah. So the thought process was initially like, okay, only people that don't have a lot of money are needing co-housing, right? And so I wanted to experiment. I figured this out when I actually started opening houses in areas that are higher end or nicer areas. And what I found was those areas have Starbucks and supermarkets and restaurants too. And where are those people going to live? Those people got to live somewhere, right?
Oh,
Those are the average working people. And so I found like those houses filled up too because people want to live where they work.
yes,
And so,
yes.
yeah, so those filled up and they do great. But there are
Nice.
challenges to it too. Some of the challenges. So here are some of the negatives to it, right? That it's great. You could get better rents, less competition because the houses are usually more expensive, right? But the downside to it is sometimes the neighbors in those areas are more nosy, right? They don't like a bunch of people living in a house next to them, maybe. And so they might be more of a problem. So that's some of the downsides. Or, people that are in nice, higher income area, more affluent, they might not like it when there's a bunch of people coming into a house or hanging outside and, in the front porch or something. So those
Got
were
it.
the challenges that you might have to deal with. You have a little bit more risk of like neighbors causing problems and, chaos. Like if you heard those old stories of like neighbors causing problems for Airbnbs where like they keep on calling the police or like harassing the people, you might run into those situations because they don't
Got it.
want those people there.
Yep.
So that's one potential risk. But there is
Got
a lot of upside. So it's just weighing. And sometimes those counties and those areas too don't like when there's a lot of people living in a home. So they could also cause you problems too.
got it. Got it. And
Yeah.
speaking of about the community and the neighborhoods, yeah, okay. If you have a problematic house, it's going to cause a problem for everybody. But
Yeah.
how do you feel it affects the neighborhoods or the communities where you have co-living properties?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great benefit actually to a lot of because then you're able to have people. So the biggest issue right now in the United States is having affordable housing. Like, where are people going to live? Like, um, at Los Angeles, for example, like or California, a lot of people in California pay more than 50% of their income towards their housing, right? It's just
Wow.
really unaffordable. And it's like that in a lot of major cities and all over the United States. And so if people can't afford a studio or an apartment building, where are these people going to live? Right? No one's really kind of figured that out or answered that question. Like, where are they going to live? Like, you have people in like San Francisco that work at Google that sleep in their car because even though they make 200, $300,000 a year, that's barely enough to buy a house in San Francisco. Houses there are like 2 million, $3 million.
That's true. But
You
I
know me.
hadn't
So
heard of that about them
oh
sleeping in
yeah,
their
no,
cars.
it's, yeah,
That's
they,
terrible.
they have engineers. There's actually somebody that was fired uh, from Google because they were sleeping in their car and then they would use the facilities because you know how like a lot of the San Francisco facilities have free food, free showers. They were like living on the campus, but they didn't they didn't have a house, because it's so expensive. I mean, it's unfortunate, but like we're providing a service that the community really needs right now.
Gotcha.
And so I do believe that we're in the very beginning stages of a whole trend where it's going to be more normalized having people co-live. It's just another option, right? Because I like to view it as it's the last resort before you're homeless. Because if you think about it, right, if you can't afford a one bedroom apartment, you can't afford a studio, then where are you going to live? We give them an additional option. At least you could live in a room, housed. You have a place to call your own where you could sleep and safe. You're not on the street. Because if they're not going to be in our room, where are they going to be? They're going to be on the street.
Right. Now, what you're talking about right now is the traditional type of um, member or
Yeah.
renter, whatever you want to call it, that Pad Split talks about.
Yeah.
But we also know that traveling nurses and that visiting people who are visiting a city or moving to a city and don't know where they want to buy. It's not just people who could be in trouble, who could be on the
Yeah.
street. There are more people, that could choose to have a a studio or a one bedroom, but don't want to pay the outrageous prices.
Yeah.
Or they're like, how am I going to get to know, um, LA? Why don't
Yeah.
I move in a house with where there are other people and I can ask them some questions
Yeah.
about it? So that there are. It's not. It isn't just that classification.
Correct.
There are many different reasons, many different niches.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, there are those options. So one thing I will say though, like there have been some companies that have been trying to pioneer that, like a higher level type of um, room rental experience, right? There are those that try to do that. A couple of those companies went out of business though. And so the hard part about it is the concept. You're kind of like in the sandwich, right? So you have to be cheaper than a studio, but you don't want to be like, let's say if you're trying to target the higher niche, you can't be too cheap either, right? Because you're going to attract a whole different type of clientele. You're trying to go like right here in the middle, right?
Right.
The problem is a lot of people don't even know co-housing, like a rent, you could even rent a room. Like a lot of people don't even know that exists. So the target market that you're aiming for, like the maybe young professional that has like a decent job or something, like that wants that be okay staying in the room or in the community. It's hard to target that. Like you're gonna have to pioneer that whole targeting that demographic because a lot of those people don't even know you exist. So
That
there is
that
a market. There is
Yeah.
that market. There are ways that you could do it, right? Like, of course, they have like Furnish Finder stuff like that. Like, you could try to target like midterm rental kind of thing. They have those, but it's just it's tricky. It's a different market. And
Got
I,
it.
I just found that it takes because I tried to do that. It just there's many strategies, different approaches. You can do it. It depends on how you want to go about it.
I got it. So you were, if I understand it correctly, you're needing to educate the people who it could work for, because they themselves haven't really heard about it yet.
Yeah, they don't even know it's an option,
Yeah. What
right?
about the
So
local authorities and communities? Have you ever had to work with them, or done anything to? Have you had any issues with them? What about the authorities, not the
yeah,
HOAs, because we're
yeah,
not buying in HOAs, but just
like the
the
city
local
and stuff
authorities.
itself. Yeah. So I mean, each jurisdiction is different. So you have some jurisdictions that are okay with it. So I'll give you an example, like Los Angeles. Like if you get it, you do it a certain way, they're okay with it. Like you do it with Denver, probably be fine. Or like, like Minneapolis is looking at trying to change the laws to allow co-housing. Like there's a lot of different jurisdictions that are embracing it, allowing it, no issues, right? Austin changed their rules recently. They don't have a limit. Like there's a lot of different cities that are open to doing it. But you have some that haven't caught up yet, right? That they don't know. Like I like to view it more as like the early stages of short-term rentals, like when Airbnb is first starting. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Because I remember back in the early days, and I kind of dating myself. I'm like I remember Airbnb just came out, and it was new, and people. I remember specifically the counties, and they do have like they'll have city council meetings, and they didn't know what it is or what to do with it. They didn't. Is it a hotel? Is it a house? Like what is it? Right? Well, now, whatever, 15, 18 years later, now they know clear cut, like this is the laws, the ordinances, this is, you have to get a permit. They only allow, like, it's clear cut now, right? It took them 15 or more years to figure it out, but they finally figured it out. So we're kind of like that with co-housing. A lot of these counties don't know, they actually try not to talk about it because they don't know what to do with it. Right? Like they're
Yeah.
just like,
Yep.
they're like, it's kind of like a secret right now. They don't want to, like, they don't know how to handle it. Like, do we, because what are they going to do, right? Like, are they going to kick these people out and make them homeless? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, these they're trying to find a place to live. Like, they're trying to survive, and they want to be, law abiding citizens and stuff. Like, and so they're trying to figure that out. Some of these counties now, some don't like it. Like I said, like nice counties, areas that are high income. Like I'll give you an example. Like in California, Beverly Hills, like they've been fighting low income housing for as long as it's existence because they don't want low income housing people in Beverly Hills. So
Yeah.
they fight it. They don't approve projects. They don't approve, like you have any. They just fight it. Like California is suing them. They're fighting each other right now in court. Right? Like it's just, it's just. So some cities, no matter what you do, they just don't want it. right?
Yeah.
That's the most extreme one that kind of comes to mind that
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
share.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
I think most
um,
people could visualize that.
yeah, that could visualize, right? You would imagine like, okay, I could see like they don't want that there, right? They don't want those type of people there in that city for whatever reason. And so, um, so have I had any encounters? So typically, um, it's the neighbors that cause like that. You know, if they don't like it or whatever, they're the ones that report you because the city doesn't. How are they gonna know you have co-housing even exists in your house unless someone reports you? Typically,
Right.
that's the case, right?
Right.
So there are ways to kind of minimize that. There's a lot of different techniques and stuff, of course, but typically it's your neighbors. So a lot of neighbors, if everything's cool, like you maintain a good property, your house is nice, they don't care. Like everyone just kind of minds their own business and you go about your day. I have
There's-
gotten notices before a couple of times, not a lot. I got only couple in the 5 years or so I've been doing it. Only got a couple of houses where I got a notice, and I was able to work it out with the city by just resolving whatever the issue was.
Right.
And there were simple fixes, like they didn't like where the where my tenants were parking or whatever. Like we fixed it, something
What
small like that.
What about mail? Do they receive mail there?
Yeah, so there's different ways you could handle the mail. I typically, so when you go at scale, when it's small, you could be involved, but I try not to be too. This is my style, okay? This is me personally. Some hosts run it different, but I try to have the house kind of work it out because what ends up happening is if you get yourself involved, they expect you to get involved for every single thing. Like every small little thing that happens there, you're gonna have to get yourself involved. So I try not to get too involved with how they handle it. So what some hosts do is you could put like a bunch of little like mailboxes inside. They have like different slots, and then for the room numbers, and then they could get their own mail there. Or sometimes they put it in a stack, and the people just get their own mail in there. Um, I usually try to ask them to not have their mail delivered to the house because I don't want to deal with like, oh, my letter is missing or my package disappeared.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
have it
I never
shipped
thought
somewhere
about
else.
that.
Like
I was
get a
thinking about
mailbox somewhere, a PO box or something like that. Like try not to get it sent to the house because now if something happens, they try to go to you and then you have to deal with it. Like so I usually don't like it or prefer they don't send it to the house. But
right.
if they do, then they got to work it out. There
Got it.
like how they want to handle it.
Yeah. I
So
was
but that's
thinking
usually
more
kind of how
about
that's
what
done.
happens when they leave because if they are shorter term,
Yeah,
then you'd have all the mail, piling up.
that happens too. Yeah, that happens too. Yeah, that
That's
does
funny.
happen.
Talk to me about the innovations. What kind of innovations have come along in co-housing that you're excited about?
Uh, well, innovations. So there isn't much in co-housing necessarily. It's more about like maybe my innovations. Like I've used technology more in my houses. I use more technology.
What kind?
So like maybe things to make the house easier to manage. So like maybe cameras. I like cameras in common areas, and you have to check your cities and stuff. Make sure like they allow. But usually, if it's in common areas, it's okay. So put it in common areas, front of the house, back of house. That helps catch if there's any issues. So like if somebody's complaining like they're taking their food or like, you know, s- trying to steal their
Susie
laundry
ate
or
my
something.
peanut butter.
Yeah. So it's like I mean it happens. When you have like 8 people in the house or 7 people or whatever in the house, it
Yeah,
happens. So trying to use technology a little bit more to manage the house better and reduce liability and risk. So those are like some things that I do. Of course, the smart thermostats, smart locks, things like that.
right.
I incorporate those.
And PetSplit uses the platform quite well. It seems like their
Yeah,
platform is pretty well developed for the members and for
yeah,
the
yeah. I mean, it's
owners.
really good. So Pad Split, like communication wise, booking wise, a lot of hosts use Pad Split because the speed of booking. One thing that's good at Pad Split is they're really fast at booking. Probably usually in the core markets, you could get them booked. Pretty quick. I mean, each house is a little bit different, like where your house location, like those play a part. But for the most part, you can book pretty quick. Like my record right now is getting a house filled within 4 days. So I had a house filled within 4 days on that split.
Nice. How many
Yeah,
rooms was that house?
eight bedrooms.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice. Oh man, that sounds great. That
yeah.
sounds really, really
Doesn't
good.
always happen, but that's my record. Yeah,
I
but a lot
gotcha.
of times they fill fast.
I gotcha. Okay, I'd like us to move on and talk a little bit about what you are doing to help other investors because you are known as the co-housing Sherpa, and I love that. I just love it. And I would like to know a little bit about, what kind of advice do you give the investors, and how do you come in contact with them, and what options do you have for them? You know,
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that. I'm going to share just so that it's on the screen, if you're all right with that,
Yeah, please.
your actual site.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah. So my site's cohousingsherpa.com. So I work a lot with like investors that want to build a portfolio. There's a lot that want to kind of do a few more. You don't need a lot too. Like you could actually get started with a few houses, and if you do them right, you could actually build a pretty decent replacement income. Like or even a side business.
That's what's
And
attractive about it, right?
yeah, yeah, because you like three houses, you could get pretty good return already. Like if you're making 12, $1,500 a month on a house, three houses, you're almost like 5, 6,000. So
Exactly.
um, yeah, so you could get a pretty good return. So I help a lot of investors that want to get started, but maybe kind of get started on the right foot.
Hmm.
I'm going to be doing something a special workshop in about a month from now. That's pad
Awesome.
split focus. If you click on the workshop in mentorship,
Okay. Hang
it's
on.
like a basic there on the webinar. Yeah, you can click on the webinar there, Effie. Under
Oh, on the
training.
webinar. Sorry
Yeah,
about
under
that.
training.
I went
Yeah,
to the wrong place.
yeah, there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a class
Oh, I love the
that I
picture.
do specifically. Yeah, that's actually me in front of my one of my actual
I love
houses.
it.
That's
I
one of my
love it.
nicest houses that I have. Yeah, and so I'll do a basics on the introduction for um, co-housing. So just kind of what to look for, like basics. So what need, what how does it work, the business model, like. So yeah, I'll do like a basic workshop in about a month. It's not too expensive. I think it's
Good. Good.
$397.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so the that's the workshop and mentorship, right?
yeah, this one's like I go more in depth. So this
Got
one
it.
is a mentorship and a workshop. I'm doing a special if ever you have anybody that wanted to do this, because with the mentorship I go over um, 8 sessions one on one after we do the class. And
Nice.
so I'll share a code. It's called Pad Split 40. So if you do a promo code, you get 40% off.
Pad split?
If Pad Split 40,
Nice.
yeah, that's the code. And then so if you do that class right there, that special one. But I have another one. It should be there. Um,
Let's talk
if not,
about
it'll
how
be by
long
the
it would
time
be
this
up
airs. It
for.
should be on there. I'll check and
Yeah,
see what happened.
well, just a
But
second. Before we leave the pad split 40, I want
yeah,
to know, because we're talking about March now, March 3rd.
yeah,
How long are you going to give that
you could click on
opportunity?
the maybe the webinar. Can you click on the webinar? I think
Because,
maybe
the
that's the one.
internet lives forever, and it could be 10 years from now, and somebody's going to say, you told me pad split
Yeah,
40.
that's um for now. Like I don't have a definite time frame. I think this is the one. Yeah, here. So
Oh, nice.
this is just a pad split specific class. So if you just want to know more about co-housing pad split, like doing it specifically on pad split, I go a little bit more detail here, just for $397, and I share a lot of the basics that you need to know
Good.
in terms
Good.
of getting started pad split, just so kind of you get started on the right foot.
Okay, that
But if
sounds
you want a
good.
more in depth, because I have a lot of different strategies that I share, and I'll share one with. I told you guys I'll share one with you guys in terms of flood properties, how I handle it. But I go into detail. So basically, every step. So I won't do it on this webinar, but if you take one of the classes with me, um, I go every step of the way. So how to choose the right market, how to choose the right house within the market, how I do the rehab, how you refinance it. A lot of people get stuck on the refinancing.
Oh, yes, and
So
that's actually one of my
refinancing it
questions.
correctly, because if not, you won't be able to refinance your house. You're going to be stuck.
Yep.
Um,
That is
and
still so new, isn't it, Franco?
it is because it's always changing. So believe it or not, and for the last 5 years, I changed my strategy 4 times. Depending on
Oh,
what happens with the interest rate, I might change it a fifth time.
okay.
So it gets very technical. There's a lot of different steps, but that's where you know like help comes in. You know what I mean? Like I wish I could just share it all, but there's a lot. Like each step, I go over it over about 4 days, sometimes 5 days if it's a bigger class. I go over it 5 days if there's a lot of questions, because I want to make sure you guys got all the information. Yeah.
Would you
So
like me
so
to
that's what I
highlight?
do. I go over all of that in detail.
That sounds fantastic. It sounds really, really good, and I may show up there myself.
Yeah. No.
um,
Definitely. Definitely.
let's talk about. I like the fact that you talked about yourself and you give them. And look at that, you even gave me credit.
Yeah.
Woohoo! What's the David Green team? What's that? I'm sorry, I
So I
don't
was
know
a
it.
guest speaker at David's private mentorship. So I
Oh,
spot David Green, so the host of
yeah,
bigger,
I
the
know.
former host of Bigger Pockets, one of the former hosts.
Right, right. Oh, and I
Yeah, so
didn't
there
realize.
I'm actually doing something with Brandon Turner's team as well. We're actually remodeling and going to be managing their first set of houses. They're actually getting into co-housing too.
I know they
So
are. I was going
yeah,
to talk to you about that tomorrow.
oh yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Yeah. So because I have a property management company too. So if ever feel free to reach out to me, Franco at cohousingsherpa.com.
Where do
Um
you advertise that?
I'm sorry, which the property management?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on getting the website up and running. We don't have it up running yet. You could email me. So we manage properties right now in Atlanta. We are looking at going into other markets. Um, but feel free if you have a property in Atlanta that we focus primarily on co-housing. We manage about 10% of all the pad splits in Atlanta. So we manage, one of the larger property managers out there. We manage several hedge funds properties. We have a lot of owners like our style, our strategies the way we approach it. We're very systematic, and so they ask us to manage their properties. So
Yeah.
you
I'm
could
asking.
email me.
I'm
Yeah,
asking.
no, yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, so we do that, and then we kind of do a turnkey solution. So we also could help out with the remodel. So every time, so as long as you get the house, we could help with from the remodel all the way down to getting it listed on PatSplit and running it for you. So
That's
we do that
fantastic.
in Atlanta. Yeah, we try to make it as turnkey as possible so our clients could grow.
And is that going to be on the same site as, the
No,
remodel?
but if you could email me, so Franco, let me type it.
Yeah,
Let me
type it
type it
into the
in here.
chat.
Yeah. So let's see if you could put it here, Franco at co-housing sherpa.com. Yeah, so that's the one right there. You could send me an email there and I could give you details on that. We're still
Wow.
working on our website
That's
of our
awesome.
property management company. Yeah.
So now,
Yeah, and then so one thing before is I want to make sure that I give that detail on the flood insurance and my strategy and how I handle flood insurance. So it's a little technique not too many people know about, but I'm okay buying properties in flood zones, right? I'm okay buying flood zone properties as long as the numbers work and I understand the risk. I always include flood insurance cost in my underwriting, as well as giving it a little room because sometimes those increase depending on where you're buying your property.
yep,
But what a lot of people don't know is you could actually, depending on where the location of the property is, you can sometimes remove the house from a flood map. You could remove it from a flood zone, right? And the way you do that is you get an elevation study done. You get an engineer, they come out, they can map, and they actually, there's certain requirements they have to comply with that FEMA guidelines have, where they, when they do this elevation study, that they could use to remove you from a flood map, right?
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
That's
so
very valuable information.
huge. It's done a lot in commercial properties. So a lot of people don't know this because it's a huge value add. I learned this from a commercial real estate investor that I know, and that even commercial side, not too many people do it because they don't know. So imagine buying an apartment building where, let's say, the flood insurance is $200,000 a year. If you're able to get that removed from a flood zone and you don't have to pay that premium, add a cap rate on that. What's the value? What's the increase of value just added by doing that study? Okay,
That's
so on the
awesome.
residential side, it's not expensive. It costs about maybe usually I'll pay anywhere from 400 to $1,000 to do an elevation study. Depends on the size of the property and such. But you pay about that, and then if you have a good elevation study, there's consultants that you could hire that specifically fight for you with your elevation study to get you removed from the flood mat. A lot of times they have a very high success rate, so they'll let you know right off the bat if they're able to do it or not. It costs usually about $1,000 or so for a residential property to hire them to go and take your elevation study, compile all the reports that they need to go fight with FEMA to get you removed. Now it doesn't
that
always
would
work.
totally change the value of the house
It
and
does. It
not just the
completely changes the value
insurance.
of the house. It
Yeah,
completely
not just
changes.
the
It's a
insurance.
huge value add because now you're not having to pay $300 to $500 a month for flood insurance, right?
Exactly.
Or sometimes, like when you do an elevation study, you also might be able to find ways to reduce your risk of damage through flood, like raising the property or doing some other things that might be able to reduce your risk. So if you
Mhm.
can't remove it from the flood zone, you'll actually be able to reduce your insurance a lot of times too.
Which you're going to
Yeah,
benefit
if
from
if you
every
do
single
certain
month.
add-ons.
So you
Yeah,
buy the house less because not many people want to buy in a flood zone.
yeah,
You buy it at a lower rate, and
yeah,
then you end up doing the study for $1,000. Even 2,000 would probably make it worthwhile if you hold on to it. Because if
yeah,
you're decreasing and it's successful, you're decreasing the insurance and you're increasing the value.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
a
So
smart
one of the things you
strategy.
could always do is one style that I like to do is before I even get the property under contract, I'll have an engineer come out that could do the elevation report, and I'll pay him before, or I'll do it during my due diligence. So if I have a
Oh,
5 day due diligence, I'll do it then, and I'll know. So if I know if I can't do it, then I just walk away. I won't close on the deal. Like I cancel my purchase. But if I can do it, then I know, like it's extra added value add.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Where did you learn it?
One of the many places, like other investors that I talk to. I know a lot of little niche strategies that I like to share. So that's one. I have a few. I have a lot of other ones that I share during my classes. But there's a lot of different things that that adds a lot of value you won't hear anywhere else. Trust me.
Yeah, I do trust you. I do trust
Yeah,
you. You're very
I
frank.
have
You're
some
very
really good
honest
ones on opportunity zones too. There's a
on
lot of things that
opportunities.
I guarantee you no one knows about opportunity zones. So, but I'll save that for another time. But
Yeah,
um, there's some really niche stuff there too on
that
how to
is
maximize those.
awesome. I can already see you might be a third return.
Yeah, definitely. So,
And
but I
guys, I
wanted to
want,
share that. That's a huge,
yeah,
thing that a lot of investors don't know about. That hopefully adds a lot of value to everybody that's
it
listening,
most definitely
and be
does.
able
It
to
most
uncover
definitely,
something new that could generate a lot of money for you.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, for sure.
No, definitely.
And um, I have been so blessed to have you in my life,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I
Yeah,
feel
appreciate it.
like,
Thank you.
well,
Yeah.
thank you. And I
Yeah.
feel like this podcast is a blessing and a little bit of a curse when I can't get it going the way I
We
want.
did have a little bit of trouble, but I'm
A
glad it
little
worked out.
bit, a little
Yeah.
bit. But I do feel a responsibility to kind of bring the best to the, people who I know watch, even if right now they're wondering, what's Effie doing? But anyhow, the point is, guys, Franco is, when it comes to the mentorship that he's been doing, it's small, which
Yeah.
means you're getting the real thing.
Yeah.
Because you know how expensive mentorships are to get the knowledge,
Yeah.
and you also know how much um, you know interaction you get with the real leaders. It's not that
I mean,
much
well, here's
very
one thing
often.
I'll share too, Effie. Like everyone I've taught, like every deal I've helped them on, they've gotten at least minimum 80,000 in equity on every deal that we've done. So like,
Yay!
yeah, everyone. So I mean, so we're working together, so it's gonna be good. But like, I could solidly say that because I don't do a lot. Like, I mean, I only do it for those investors that they're not really interested. Like, I don't really. I make more money off my houses and my deals. Like, I mean, like that's
Yes,
where I
yes,
focus. But like,
absolutely.
but I've been there and I'm an investor myself, and I knew what it took and what like how I got to to do like learn and do co-housing the way I do it now. And it kills me to see investors lose a lot of money because I've seen it happen a lot of times. And so I just want to shortcut it. If there's somebody that just wants to do it, great. If they don't want to, that's great. But I just want to help wherever I could. But that is one thing that I could solidly say with everyone I've worked with. We've gotten they've gotten really great returns on the deals that
Yeah,
we've
I
done
believe
together.
it. I believe it.
Yeah.
When a person doesn't isn't doing a mentorship, if that's not their main source of their income, you know that they're doing it because it's from the heart.
Yeah. No,
When
definitely.
it
Yeah.
becomes like the main source of income, you're like,
Yeah. I know.
wait a
It gets a
minute,
little bit
guys.
different. Yeah.
So, all right, guys, you heard it. Pad split 40
Yeah.
for a 40% discount. And
Yeah.
I don't know, how long should we make that
Yeah.
good
I mean,
for?
at least I'll run it for at least 2 months, at least.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll run
Okay,
it for
so
at
that
least two
would be
months.
good
Yeah.
to
For everyone
uh,
that's listening.
April 1st.
Yeah.
We
Around
got
April
March
1st.
and April. So,
Well, I'll do
no,
it until like
May
maybe the
1st.
end of April. Yeah.
Yeah,
May 1st. Yeah.
May 1st. So before May 1st, if you, I'm sure the recording is going to get a fair amount of hits once it's up there and they go, okay, I can see it now.
Yeah.
And what
But
happened to Facebook? Well, I'm not even going to think about that.
yeah. Because
Um,
it'll open your eyes. I'll tell you, I go pretty deep. Like, especially on the financing side. A lot of people make a mistake. They don't fully understand their financing. Like, I go really deep in financing. Like, I know the terms of all my houses in terms of
nice.
like what's in my contract. Most people don't even know. Like, I know the terms that are in a contract. We go deep. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. I'd like to say thank you so, so much.
Right. Definitely.
And to
My
my,
pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
oh, thank you for being here. And to my viewers, I'm just going to say, there's a learning curve. Riverside is worth it for for the quality once it's downloaded and uploaded again. But I am still very low on that curve, and just bear with me during this time. Thank you, Franco.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
you
and I
guys.
will see you tomorrow.
Definitely. See you tomorrow.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.